questions or any observation, any statement, anything? Yes, please.
This is a question which I've kind of...
Come to the microphone, please. Is there one? Yes.
This is a question which a friend of mine asked.
But it's not working, the microphone. Now it's all right, yes?
This is a question which a friend of mine asked. He's a Shia Muslim. He married about 18 years ago to an English girl. He married to an English girl 18 years ago.
Shia Muslim.
Shia Muslim, that's right. And marriage took place in a registry office. He has been told by his community leaders that he's living in sin. He asked me, what's the view of your community on this?
The ceremonialization of marriage, according to Islam, is not as limited as most of the Maulvis believe. The fact is that when non-Muslims become Muslims, their marriage is not repeated, and their children are always taken in as legitimate. So if the marriage ceremony held according to their own custom was not legitimate, how could their children be considered legitimate by Islam? So it is totally an erroneous, false idea. What Islam requires is that a regular marriage ceremony should be held in accordance with the local customs or the customs of their people. And if that is not a crime according to the social order in which that marriage is ceremonized, then it is not a crime from any religious point of view either. So, but those who are already Muslim and know a better way and a definite form of ceremonialization, if they intentionally ignore it, do an inferior system, and knowing that Islam requires this, that is in itself a crime, but of a smaller order which will not affect the fact of marriage, which will remain valid.
To start with something I could not understand myself. I'd like to ask you.
Yes, please.
We seem to, in our religion, I get the impression, in our writings, we get the impression that we name the founder of the Ahmadi movement, we call him the Messiah more often, the Mahdi. So I would have thought the Mahdi, pointing to the second advent of the Holy Prophet, would be mentioned more often. Is there some wisdom, or is it my own mistake? Seems to me that
that Messiah, there are two offices, one Messiah and the other Mahdi, Mahdiviyyat. And out of the two, one with much wider worldwide publication is that of Messiah, not of Mahdi. Because Mahdiviyyat is known only to the Muslims, while Messiahhood is worldwide known, not only to the Christians but also to the Muslims and the Jews. So the three most important nations of the world, which if join hands together will conquer the entire world forever, rule the entire world forever, are Jews, Muslims and Christians. In their own respective way, they are the strongest people on earth. Not if they are warring with each other, but when their might is put together, I mean. So all these three nations believe that Messiah would come. And also they believe that the golden age, that myopic age, which has ever been eluding man, would appear after the advent of Messiah. So because this is the most commonly known phenomena, the coming of Messiah. This is why automatically the Ahmadi literature shifted to the use of Messiah. And also because the Ahmadi knew themselves that there are not two persons. The person is one, and he would be holding two offices. So practically it doesn't make any difference. Mahdaviyat is understood by Messiah, and also you must have heard, and the Ahmadis present this by way of argument to non-Ahmadis, that Hazur sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is known to have said, Lal Mahdiyo illa Isa. Mahdi and Isa are one and the same thing. There won't be any other Mahdi than Isa, or any Isa other than a Mahdi. So all these things make that preference of Messiahhood very insignificant. It doesn't make any difference if you don't mention the name of Mahdi. The name of Mahdi, it is a part of Messiahhood. It's not different. Yes. One sound.
Muhammad Messiah has written in book Cristiano that it is in a sort of interrogation.
This is a bit shorter than your height. You could lift it a bit further. The microphone, the mouth of the microphone should be tilted upwards.
My question is like this, that Hazrat Musleh Maud has written in his book, Cristiano, in a form of interrogative form, that it is not blessing of God that God had given you the kingdom of Bani Israel and Baitul Muqaddas. So question arises that nowadays Baitul Muqaddas is not in the occupation of Muslims. And the people object like this, that promised Messiah should convert both were Muslims, but the occupation, the Baitul Muqaddas, which is occupied by Muslims, now is not under the control of.
I couldn't quite follow this question.
The question is like this, that Baitul Muqaddas is nowadays not in the occupation of Muslims.
Correct. That is understood.
And I mean to say that why it has been not in the occupation of Muslims.
Why is it not?
And particularly when Thomas Messiah has spoken that it will be remain in the occupation or in the
Ultimately.
that I understand.
It so happens that for the time being, things and places are usurped by other people. And also it so happens that comparatively, sometimes very little difference is left between the so-called righteous and the so-called unrighteous. If both begin to behave in the same manner, then no preference can be made. So because Allah is all-knowing and is also just, He would not make undue preferences. Sometimes things are left open to a mutual fight. Whichever wins, it's okay, it's one and the same thing, doesn't make any difference. Only Allah takes sides with the weaker when He finds the weaker to be of such high and exceptional quality as that quality has to be guarded against all evil. Now, they are special occasions. So this is why Allah Ta'ala in Holy Quran has said, Innal arda yarisuha ibadiyas salihun. That this piece of land, that is Baitul Muqaddas and the adjoining area, that would be inherited only by the righteous people. So if it is not in the hands of the Muslims, the only inference which could be drawn or should be drawn by the faithful is that they are not righteous. Had they been righteous, Allah could not have forgotten His own promise or eaten up His words. either the Holy Quran is right or the present day Muslims are right. They stand in exactly diametrically opposed positions. So if this verse is to be believed, the only inference that can be drawn is that the Muslims are not righteous, or Allah would never have forgotten His promise and permitted people other than the Muslims to occupy the land.
The owner of car number PB. The owner of car number PBL541R is requested to remove his car as it is blocking the way. Owner of car number PBL541R.
Some neighbors passageway.
Please remove this car as it is blocking the doorway of some neighbors.
Yes, please. When did you from Glasgow?
This afternoon.
Alright,
From Glasgow. Hazur, my question is very fundamental because one of the Scottish family is Alhamdulillah under Tabligh, and they said they are well-to-do family, and they said that we have a concept of. They are
only about fortnight ago you went there and settled. And during that short period you have already
established the
made acquaintance and established a pleasing relationship.
Yes, Alhamdulillah. Hazur, the family says that we have a concept of happiness as to, because there is well-to-do family,
Right.
and we got the material things, and they are church-going people, and they said that when we go to church or we do not go to church, the concept of happiness in our life does not change. So it means going to church doesn't make any difference to us. Then they asked me this question, that if we start listening to you or to Islam as a whole, how this concept is going to be changed? Because according to them, the religious is not going to change that concept of happiness, because those things, materialists, because they think very materialistically.
This is a very interesting question, and I think instead of your working as a go-between, it would be much better if you bring them here one day and we sit together, spend a couple of hours to discuss various aspects of this question, because this is a very wide question, applicable to almost every sphere of life. First of all, happiness will have to be defined. What is happiness? Then what types of happiness are in existence? Religious, material and otherwise, or is it one indivisible happiness which takes different forms in various situations? So all these questions first have to be solved by a philosophical discussion of this concept of happiness. Then things will become very easy. Otherwise, if you don't define happiness and enter this debate, then the confusion will continue and you will not be able to make them understand what you really mean. Right. But as I told you, this cannot be handled in this manner, that I speak to you piecemeal and then you convey, because sometimes they would have questions. Suppose I have told you something about it and it is not what they had in mind. You'll start a few sentences and an unexpected question suddenly would arise, and then you would know that the answer was not sufficient. This is like learning languages and practicing them. Did I tell you about my experience of Chinese? That landed me into a very similar embarrassing situation. You know Usman Chini Sahib, don't you? I once asked him to teach me about 100 odd sentences in Chinese which can be used in everyday life. But he should teach me in such a manner that I should be able to speak it like a Chinese. Perfect pronunciation and intonation and everything. So he worked very hard on me. And we did it like this, that I said, okay, if I go to a Chinese shop, I'll say, hello, ne hao ma, and what would be his answer, and then what would be my second question or his question. So we visualize things. And then, fully armed with his Chinese, I walked into a Chinese restaurant in Pindi. And in the same manner as he had taught me, I said, "Ne hao ma." So that impressed him so much that he believed that I knew Chinese perfectly well. So he started speaking Chinese, like a frontier male. And none of the sentence which I had remembered was used by him. So I started telling him in English, I don't know, but he went on and on. So this is how sometimes one faces such a situation. Such conversations should be held directly. I prefer that. Muhammad Oda? Huh? Do you have anything to ask?
Yes, sir.
Yeah? So what about you?
Waiting for the right time.
Yes, that's it. This is why I asked you, because I thought you would not ask unless I asked you first. You're waiting for permission, isn't it? Yes, please come on.
1982 in month August when we met in Frankfurt. It was very much interesting for myself and according to my knowledge at that time, something about mathematics and about doppling, the mathematics of doppling, which Allah teach us for the creation.
I couldn't catch the word mathematics of what?
The mathematics of the doubling.
Doubling.
For example, one. If
Oh,
you
that's right. The one I taught you there.
yes,
The one I mentioned in the mosque.
yes, sir.
Are you referring to that?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Now, it was so much for me inside me that I did not. I have some knowledge on this mathematics. I've studied some time about it, and I made such a research, small research, and my question is actually, if there is a formula which we can say through this Allah has created the creation
The whole life and everything.
through the mathematics of the doubling.
Yes.
Because if there is, then I might
I understand your question.
this.
Please sit down. By mathematics of doubling, this young brother Muhammad Oda means that once during 1982 visit to Frankfurt, I explained to the young men present that you cannot become victorious unless you follow the ways of nature and the reproductive system of nature. And that system is not like a missionary system that out of a community of 500 or 1,000, just one missionary is expected to produce, or like the honey bee comb system, where just one queen is reproductive and the rest are laboring and working to support the queen. The system observed in nature is very different. It began with doubling. When you study the form of early life, you come to realize that the odds against life were so great that if every cell was not capable of doubling, life simply could not have survived those great odds. So to begin with, the early life followed this system of doubling. Each cell doubled and redoubled and redoubled, with the result that in a matter of hours, some bacteria made colonies for which there is no known number to count in any human language. I mean, they swell to such size and number that no human language can cover that number, because each cell multiplied. So that is what he is referring to by saying mathematics of doubling. I said in preaching, it is highly important that we follow the ways of nature, and instead of depending upon a few missionaries or just a few very forward people, if each Ahmadi learns how to double at least once in a year, then that victory, which appears to be far, far beyond your reach, and is in fact receding from you at a faster pace than you are walking or running towards it. I explained to them that it is a fact that people, non-Ahmadis I mean, are reproducing through the normal sexual system, the normal reproductive system, at 100 times or more rapid rate than we are gaining converts. So how could you ever dream of capturing the entire world for the sake of Islam unless you rectify your ways and begin to imitate nature of Allah, and the nature which was imitated by every prophet. And during the early time of prophethood, this was the phenomena which was responsible for great revolutionary changes and none other. This is what I tried to impress upon them, and also I quoted an example to make them remember this. It's a very interesting example. It is said that the person who invented chess, the king of China, it is said that he was a Chinese and it was the emperor of China to whom it was presented, but whatever the details be, they are neither here nor there. The conversation which passed between them, that is important. The emperor was so pleased that he asked the inventor of chess to name his prize, and it would be for the asking. So he said, "O Emperor, the prize is very big. I hope you will not mind if I ask that prize." He said, "No, name anything. My empire is far too big for you to defeat me." So he said, "Take one piece of rice, one seed of rice, put it in the first check, what do you call khana, first khana? Chess में भी square कहते हैं? हाँ, yes. In the first square, and 2 in the second square, and 4 in the third, and 8 in the fourth, and 16 in the fifth, and 32 in the sixth, and 64 in the seventh, and so on and so forth. Calculate this number, and please give me only those seeds of rice which, according to calculation, should fall to the lot of the last check, last square." So the king was very much annoyed. He said, "Behead this man because he has insulted me. He asked too little. And he has insulted him by asking such a trivial thing from me." The prime minister was a very mathematical man. So he kept on working in his mind, and he asked the king, begged the king to permit him to speak. So he said, "Yes, what do you want to say?" He said, "Behead him all right, but not for asking too little, for asking too much. Because if you sell the entire empire, still you cannot fulfill his demand." That is exactly how it works out. Because once I remember this, when I was in the first year in government college, somebody asked me this question. He said, look here, if there is a piece of paper so thin or so thick that in 1 inch 50 sheets should be accommodated. And you put 50 sheets one over the above, and that would make 1 inch. So take that paper and fold it, double it 50 times. How high would be the height of that pile of papers? That was the question. So in those days there were no computers and my mathematics was very weak. It took me 2 days to work it out, and ultimately, can you imagine what the result was? Can anybody offer a guess? You, Muhammad Oda? Pardon? How high the pile would rise if you fold the paper doubling each time? In? How big? Could it reach a mile high? More? So which is the highest, tallest guess? Yes?
Be larger than the planet Earth, sir.
Much larger. Because it is 1 crore 66 lakh some thousand miles high. So take a calculator, you can now calculate it in a matter of minutes. Just press it and continue to press. 1 crore 66 lakh and some thousand miles, not inches. So this is the fantastic mathematics of nature which Allah has taught us for the preservation of life and for the plan of future development and evolution of life. So as life progressed, the division of labor took place and fewer cells were involved. And a larger portion of the cells were absolved of the responsibility of reproduction in one manner. But in another manner, they continue to reproduce individually, each cell or life would have got extinct. For instance, in the human body of every person, each living cell is reproducing and multiplying. Otherwise, the daily use of energy and the stress of our labors would dissolve the whole body and dissipate it into nothingness within a matter of days or weeks. Because every 7 years, the whole system of the body, every cell is changed into a new one. And the number of cells is so great that again there is no word in any language to count that number. Unimaginably high. And that body is maintained by the process of duplication. Yet for reproduction, just a few cells are specialized. But when I say a few, the order is still very high. When somebody's count falls and it is said that only 100,000 cells per drop are visible, then doctors begin to express hopelessness about his possibility to bear children. They say the number has fallen so low that you can't bear children now. There is a remote possibility. It has to be normally 4 million per field. So that is an immense number. So those have the capability of doubling and reproducing in the form of another human being. So I told him, if you want to really conquer the world for the sake of Islam, learn Allah's ways and know that at the time of every prophet, this was the phenomena adopted. as we learned from the history of Ahmadiyyat, it's a fresh history in our mind. At the time of Masih Maud, every Sahabi, every companion was a preacher, and he was reproducing. And the second advantage of this is, which perhaps he doesn't remember, but I also told him, that if you reproduce at every level, then you draw a balanced society from around you. Like it happened at the time of Hazrat Masih Maud. A Nawab would be preaching to a Nawab, an advocate would be preaching to an advocate, a peon would be preaching to a peon. In their own respective spheres, Ahmadiyyat spread in a most well-balanced manner. A miniature society was created which was exactly depictive of the society outside. It was miniature, but in proportions. It was reflective of what was around. But if you ask just the missionaries to preach, they have their limited reach. And every missionary has his own reach. Some can fly high, some can fly low, and they can't change that platform of their approach because they are made like it. So then you will be very limited in your approach. So whichever way you look at it, you should be fully prepared for a large-scale contact with the non-Muslim world. A very large contact is to be made now. We have already lost so much time. This is why I gave the first target to Germany to be 100 German Muslims. And I said, as long as you do not gain following from the local people who are the true sons of the soil, you cannot establish Ahmadiyyat anywhere in any country of the world. So I'm so happy that despite the fact that many of the boys there are not highly educated compared to other countries, compared to England for instance. The standard of per capita education is positively lower and much lower than that of the Ahmadis living in the UK. Yet their speed of progress and propagation is much faster, because during the last 4 or 5 months since I launched this scheme there, they have got 50 converts by now with the grace of Allah. While ever since the inception of mission up to the time when this new scheme was introduced, there were not 50 converts over all that period. And among them, with the grace of Allah, 16, some are Germans, and some are, for instance, Yugoslavs, Italians, even Sinhalese, and there is a wide variety of people coming from various directions. So the target was 100 German Muslims. And the next target which I wanted to give the German Muslims was, in particular, to swell to the size of 1,000 as soon as possible. And the longest I was ready to give them was before the centenary. We should have 1,000 Muslims. If you reach the platform of 100, I assure you it will not at all be difficult. And during my short experience with various people of the world, my preaching experience was limited mostly to Pakistan previously. But now I have reports from all over the world. From my experience, I can say that you can pin very high hopes in Germans. They are very serious. Once they accept a message, they become seriously devoted to it. And they don't take things lightly. And they are people who are ideal for regimentation. They have always produced results through regimentations. So through religious regimentations, 100 Germans can create revolution in the country. And once they become 1,000, then you'll see the things changing everywhere in every direction, most rapidly. And that can become the first European country to become a Muslim, while it was the last to become Christian. So that is the beauty about the German people. They were the last to accept Christianity. In fact, it is wrong to say they accepted Christianity. They did not. The only people in Europe who refused point blank to accept Christianity were the German people, until it was decided by the other German nations to put them to sword. And through the use of sword, they destroyed a large number of the Germans, and whatever was left was forced to accept Christianity under the punishment of death. So that is also a great compliment to them. Their simple, straightforward minds could not understand the intricacies of Christian doctrine of Trinity. This is why they didn't accept. And their simple, straightforward minds are readily accepting Islam because it is exactly according to their nature. So this is why I am relying on Germans to become first European country which should be declared a Muslim country. And this is not a tall hope or high talk. The fact is that my short experience with them reassures me that the moment they reach these two stages, one after the other, first 100 and then 1,000 German, then things will spread very rapidly, inshallah. That is the mathematics of doubling. Now you understand? No, I was asking him. He had asked about this mathematics of doubling, so I was addressing him about it. Yes, please now, continue.
Is it the reason that Germans seem to incline towards the Islam, or they are ready to accept that they have done so much research on Christianity and did not find anything, because their research is very high?
They have their own distinct approach to life. They are not like other ordinary people of Europe. In fact, every European country has its own stamp and style of character. So the French are different, the Germans are different, the British are different. They have their own respective good qualities. I am not denying the other European countries the right to be praised. They should be praised in their own respective qualities of excellence. But for Islam, I think the Germans are by far the best. And if there are others who think they are best, they should come forward, like Mr. Bashir Orchard, and he should try to prove me wrong in this respect by establishing a faster moving community in England. In this respect, I will not be offended if anybody proves me wrong. So shall we say, have the boys come after eating, or they are still at it? Find out, somebody from the Novel India will find out if the Quran are ready for prayer or not. Yes, please, somebody raise his hand in the meantime. You did? Yes.
This mathematics of doubling, I was thinking about the creation of...
You have regularly coined this term now. Mathematics of doubling.
The creation of the earth and the skies. which Allah said, فاطر السماوات والأرض, when He says, خلقنا من كل شيء زوجين اثنين. So I was thinking that the beginning also was supposed to be two, زوج, and through the doubling it has been to four.
No, in the beginning there was one.
Yes, one. Yes.
Then it was turned into two. And from then on, it was a system of doubling.
Yes. So this is all, and said that I've just found the formula of this. I've just found a formula in mathematics how we can prove everything with it.
Well, this Zhejiang is a different phenomenon. It does not apply to the concept of doubling of which we were talking. This Zhejiang is a completely different phenomenon. It is also a very wide, a word of very wide application. Zhejiang in one instance means a system of complementation. Everything is complementary and not complete in itself and not independent. There is a complementary unit to everything. That is one way of saying. For instance, each atom in the world, in the universe, is in need of joining hands with some other. And this is what is called valency. Some have single valency, some 2, 3, 4, and so on, up to 4. The interplay of this desire to meet others and be complemented is a system of Zhejiang. Similarly, divide whatever you find in the world of chemistry or physics, I mean, or animal life, you will find this Zhejiang system in existence. The scientists have delved very deep now in the secrets of existence, and they have gone very deep into the subatomic world as well, subparticle world. And they find that everything is in pairs. If there are quarks, positive quarks, there are negative quarks. If there is a positive electron, there is a negative electron. If there is a negative electron, positive positron, and a negative positron, they give different names to them. So each element, which is subparticle element, and they have divided into so many categories, like muon and neutrino and so on, they all have an opposite number. If one is positive, the other is negative. If the other is negative, the other one is positive. With the result that the sum total of this universe is 0. The whole universe, if it is added together, would turn out to be 0. Which means this is how God has created from nothingness. It is in fact nothingness, but nothingness has been divided into two types of existences, and they are kept separate from each other. You bring these two existences together, and they will ultimately result into nothingness. The result, sum total, would be 0. Like an equation, if the two sides of that equation are brought together, the result is 0. So an equation sign has been created by God in nothingness, between the two types of nothingness. And this is what we observe as the universe. So that Zhejiang system is different. I mean, it is I'm just quoting a few examples. It's a very interesting system of khalaqa, how God created Zhejiang and what he means by that Zhejiang. It doesn't mean the doubling which we were discussing.
Yes, that's totally away from me. That means that this, if we say one thing is that in the beginning the earth was so small, and then through the opening of the atom it has been bigger and bigger, so with the water.
In one sense, you're right. As far as the mass is concerned, you're not right. The mass remained the same, but the expansion kept on, and new shapes were given to existence. New forms were created, but not the increase in mass. After the first Big Bang, whatever mass had disappeared into that black hole came out again, and it remained so till today. It changed into the form of energy or energy took shape of mass, matter, but the sum total remained the same. Yet expansion there has been going on, of course. The universe is expanding at such fast rate that in places, in the farthest removed edges of universe are moving at a speed which is unimaginable by you, because they are receding at the speed of 140,000 miles per second, about 2/3 the speed of light. So that is the expansion of the universe. Allah Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, "Wa inna la museum." We have created this universe, and we are the expander. We expand. The word expander is not used in English, I know, normally, but in Arabic it is used. So this can be translated, we cause the expansion. And we are those, Allah sometimes, for expression of greatness, uses plural for himself. But particularly at occasions of grandeur, this tense of plural is used. It says, "Inna la museum." After creating, we have not kept quiet or left things as they were. We kept on expanding them. And this process of expansion is our attribute. Museum does not mean that we expand. It means it is our quality. It is our attribute that we go on expanding. So this expanding universe has been mentioned in this verse of the Holy Quran. अच्छा ये अजान